Hi, everybody. I'm gonna call my friend Jess Byrd, uh, and we are gonna talk for a little bit. Jess is a founder of 3 Point Strategies and a leader in the movement for Black Lives, and an all-around just total fucking badass and brilliant person. I am. You guys know I'm not wonderful with technology, so I'm. Wait. Oh, wait. Hold on. Okay. I think Jess is watching, so let me just find her on the thing and then. God, I'm bad at this. Oh, God. Dude. Jess, are you watching? So I can just, call you? Oh, no. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Send a request to be in the live video, and then I will call you. Well, this part is embarrassing. I'm sorry. The rest of the conversation will be enlightening, but this part is just me fucking floundering. Okay, and then Jess is supposed to accept the invite. Oh, good God. Right. Where? I think I invited her. Oh, God, you guys. And she only has 45 minutes because she needs to be on the call with on the next call with actual legitimate people. Okay. Okay, I'm looking for you, Jess. Wait. What in the world? Wait for it. Oh, you guys. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm waiting for Jess. Whew, God, that was a real.
Annie!
Oh my God.
That was my fault, boo. It was all my fault.
No, I'm really not good at it at all. So
Me neither. This
sorry.
is my first live, Annie.
Oh my God.
I know. You look
at
so
you.
good.
Oh, I put on makeup for you.
And I put on a red lip for you.
Oh, it's really strong and nice.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is great. Thank you for having me. Sorry, y'all. That was my auntie Bird coming through.
Thank you so much for doing this. You're probably the busiest woman in America right now. You were
one of several thousand, maybe.
Right. Well, you're being. Yes, you were part of a larger movement, but you were on the phone with Time earlier today, so you're
that is
chatting with me, and you were like, what was it, 2015, when you were Essence's 15 most influential women.
It's so funny when stuff like that happens, and I can imagine that at times it can feel the same. I'm not sure if political music industry vibe around visibility and celebrity, but some of the things in order for you to shape narrative and to win things, you have to take up space, you know? And so
Yeah.
in 2015, when I was starting my firm, I don't know if I'm blowing our intro, but when I was starting
No, no,
our
no.
firm,
Run.
okay, cool. It's like I I had to like be like, I have to step out front. I have to say that Black women should be elected. I have to say bold things about race and politics. I have to say bold things about voting. And then what happened was I noticed that I needed to also take a step back so that others could stand in the gap. And I feel like now I'm like feeling like I have to be called back into that like stuff, and it's so uncomfortable. I would rather be on live with you.
I would rather just be talking to you at most points of the day. But I noted this actually looking at your Twitter a little while ago, where you're like, I don't want to take credit for things I haven't done, or like take exactly what you were just saying. Like, you don't want to pretend to be an expert in something you're not. But luckily, you are an expert in this particular field, which is why I talk to you and get the opportunity for like other people to just hear it like straight from you, straight from the source, as somebody who's really deeply involved in the movement. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell them how we met.
Yes.
Okay, so this was like 10 years ago.
Isn't it crazy how time has flown? Yes, it was 2012. It was 2012.
Yeah. Okay, so that's right. It was 2012. So, I had a friend who was like, oh, let's go meet my friend who happened to be a pretty famous actor.
Yes.
At this cafe. I'm like, okay. So I go, and this particular famous actor had just that day like picked up your good friend Geneva. Like,
yes, my best friend in the whole world. Yes.
Like I remember the story being like he didn't whistle at her because that would be crazy, but he had a line, and Geneva had
he met her in a coffee shop. Yeah. And like followed her out of the coffee shop. Yeah.
It was like, I need to know you. And so they hung out that whole day or something as like a first date. Yes. And the day culminated, for me, it culminated in going and meeting you guys at this cafe and realizing like the actor was going on and kind of doing his actor-y thing. And like you, me, and Geneva were just like, oh, we like each other. Like we're on a level.
Yes.
And we ended up talking. I remember we were talking about your work in the, at that time it was Obama.
Yeah, I've been working in politics. Yeah, I was working for a big political action committee called Emily's List. And so I was electing Democratic women who are pro-choice and believe in reproductive justice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what's crazy, I feel like I'm seeing folks be like, oh my God, is that, so first of all, I just had a big breakup. And it was around July 4th, I think. And so I meet a friend, and it's New York freaking City. She's like, meet me. It was like, meet me by 14th Street or something. And I like go in Urban Outfitters, 26 or something. Yeah. And come out, and she's like, you will never believe what happened to me and who I just spent the day with. And she's like, so we're gonna go and like meet him, just be cool. I'm like, mm-hmm. I woke up cool. It's, sounds good. So then we walk in, and I'm like, oh no, this is not just like a person who's an actor. This is multiple people. There are Oscars and Grammys on the table. And so I think what's interesting about that memory for me is that I remember as there were things being said at the table that we didn't agree with politically. Yeah. We were like looking at each other like, I think that's my person right there. Yeah, it totally was. And I remember, because then when the dinner ended, and the one thing about celebrities, y'all, like if for folks while watching this, is that then like folks around us, and this was one of my first times experiencing it, like do a thing. So there's like more drinks and more ice cream, and I hadn't at the time been like doted on like that. So I was just sitting here like, it just was. It was like, a totally thing. The waitresses and the staff were definitely like, oh, another app platter.
you know,
Yes.
it was definitely like,
Yes, I think they went down the block and like brought some ice cream. And I just remember by that time when the kind of the weirdness, I'll say, started to like vibe in the air, you and I were locked into a conversation around abortion rights.
yeah.
And then everyone leaves and are talking about fancy things, and you and I were still like locked in. Like, you're like, I think you were asking me about a bill or something, and I'm like, that is going to be my friend. And then I feel like an important part of the next part of the story is I remember leaving. I tell my best friend Geneva, I'm like, I had such a good time. That was so fun, you know. And then I have to admit, I went home and like looked up your music and hadn't. I know that like feels weird for you, but I feel like it was so nice for me because I had this lovely conversation and connection. And then when it becomes something that you're like, yo, and like she's dope in other ways. And so that was really nice. And then we saw each other again in Zara, y'all.
The next
day.
The next day we saw each other in Zara on Fifth Avenue. And we were like, this is kismet. This has to happen.
And so then we got drinks that night, right?
And I remember being like, oh my God, I just met this amazing group of women, but you, I mean, I talked to you.
We definitely had a friend connection.
So, for sure. And so I remember thinking like, how can I get their number without going through like a very circuitous route of channels that would be a little bit like weird?
Yeah.
I was like,
but it ended up the way it was supposed to.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think when I look back on our friendship, and I know that we'll kind of get into this conversation, is what I've always really liked about you, and I feel like as people are grappling with this moment, is you never want to feel like you're arriving in a conversation with your armor on to convince someone. You want to be in dialogue in a way that is like generative and connective, but also like curious. And I always feel like you're really curious. You always ask me a lot of questions.
Aww.
So you'll say like, but what do you think about this? Or I was reading this, and what's your take on that? And I feel like that curiosity has meant that I feel like when I show up in conversation with you, and I feel like I get to ask you things too. I'm like, I don't, you know, that I don't know as much about where you grew up or, you know, et cetera. And so, I think, and then also when we decided to do this, it was like, people should be experiencing curiosity right now about how they should be showing up in dialogue. A lot of what we do now, we do a performance of our politics on social media, and that's fine. I do it too, and I have very strong beliefs, opinions, experiences in a certain way. But I also am like, the hard work of being politicized is when we do it with each other, when no one's looking, when you're just asking the right questions and trying to learn so that you can decide how you feel about something and want to show up in a moment.
Yeah, for sure. And just one of the things I always love about seeing you is I would probably alienate a lot of smart people who I know by saying you're the smartest person I know, but I don't know anyone smarter is what
Annie,
I'm not being nice. I don't know anybody smarter. And every time
I don't know a bigger rock star, so
well, that's your just aim a little higher. But every time I leave a conversation with you, I feel viscerally inspired, like viscerally, like holy shit, you know. And so I mean, I value our friendship for a lot of reasons, but I just can't thank you enough for just all of the, like, you know, whether it's just your own insight, whether it is studied in feminist theory or critique, all this stuff. It just, you synthesize it and you put it into the work that you're doing. You enact your inner thoughts. You make them happen in your life. That's just wonderful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Where should we start? A lot is going on.
Well, okay, so what I want to know, kind of from your perspective, because you're in Philly or right now, or should I not say where you are? I don't want to not gonna endanger you. Okay. So I guess my first question is like, what should people be doing? What should people be doing right now in order to help? Because I feel like, especially when we talk about like social media activism, like, well, I reposted this thing, so I'm a good person, or whatever it is, like, and in general, the sort of diffuse nature of information and news and everything like that goes on. From your perspective, from you, like, what should people be doing in order to help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll zoom out for just a minute, and then I want to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm an organizer within an ecosystem called the Movement for Black Lives, and I also lead a firm of Black women strategists called 3 Point Strategies. And so I kind of wear two distinct hats, and I want to say this because I want you all to show up and hear me in this with those hats on. So one is we elect progressive Black women at 3 Point Strategy. So I was our second campaign ever was Stacey Abrams. And over the course of 4 years, I worked with her and many other brilliant people and served as her deputy campaign manager. And then in the Movement for Black Lives side of things is I was deeply politicized by Ferguson and Baltimore in particular. And I think when you met me, you know, I was working on campaigns. I love campaign work. It's super addicting for me.
Yeah.
I love winning things. Like, I love the formula. I love writing a field plan.
Yeah.
I love it. And I remember as Ferguson was happening and I was watching Mike Brown's body lay in the street, I was sitting at my desk at Emily's List. I was crying, watching these live feeds. I was I was texting my friends who were being shot with rubber bullets. And I literally just was like, how can I do electoral work more unapologetic? How can I contribute to movement? If this moment, and I remember this so specifically, because I'm like, if this moment is the uprising moment of my generation, could I actually be able to say that I showed up in it with my full power? And at the time, the answer was no. And so I started to really think about that like for 10 years, I've been building this one skill, which was to run campaigns, and that I didn't know where to put it at the time. And so I started to just really dig in with people, with organizers, with folks in cities all over the country who had already been in community with. But I'm like, but how can electoral work really support this? So we created the Electoral Justice Project, which is a project of the Movement for Black Lives. And so I give you all that context to say that folks have been preparing for this moment for a long time. They, from 2012 and the murder of Trayvon Martin, to Ferguson and Mike Brown, to Freddie Gray, to Sandra Bland, what has happened now in the last 6 years is this collection of not only organizing, but a strengthening of organizing. Then we've added Trump into the mix. Now we've added COVID into the mix. People were watching their families die slowly, and then their families die on TV. And we wonder why there's this incredible swell in 50 states, in cities across those places, this uprising. And so what you can do right now is several things. One is you should join if you can, and if it makes sense for you. Two is the Movement for Black Lives has created a website full of demands. It's called defundblacklives.org. And it's a place where you can go and see exactly what folks are demanding right now. One last thing I'll say is in 2014, this conversation really rattled power structures, and people immediately started to come up with reform language. Okay, I know what we'll do. We'll train police officers better. We will, we'll add body cameras. We'll do these things. And in the last 6 years, data, evidence, more murders has demonstrated that actually that like short-term stepping reform is just not enough. And so the movement now is asking that we defund the police in our cities, and that's the demand. I want people to sit with that. I want them to think about what that means and what their taxpayer dollars are going to, and then to demand more from their local officials.
Well, when you talk about defunding the police, explain that a little bit more in depth, if you can. Like, well, I know you.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good because it feels radical, and I want to encourage everyone to actually just sit with what we're actually saying. Every single locality, city, has a budget. And the budget is created by, depending on where you live, by a collection of the mayor, the city council, in some places like a county executive, and they literally have line items. The same if you're like have a budget for your rent and your groceries, right? It has a line item. And in most places across the country, the line item for the police is not only bigger than any other line item, but in some places it can be close to 30-40% of the budget of the entire city. And so that means in places like New York City, where the police budget is a huge percentage of the city's budget, that what taxpayer dollars, like literally the part of your check that goes to city, city services like traffic lights and the fire, the fire department, etc., is actually going for tanks, rubber bullets, tear gas, and for essentially an out of control police department that feels like it can kill Black people with impunity and without accountability. So the defund part is actually a way for us to define that it's just not enough to say, why don't we give you more money to add more trinkets? Right. What if you just, in fact, we could give you more money to train yourself on how to be not racist. Right. When instead what we could do, and that actually meets the height of the need, is to say, what if we took that money for healthcare, for economic justice? What if we create reentry programs for returning citizens who have been formerly incarcerated? What if we took those services and created a community safety space that actually then reinvests it in keeping our community safe? And so that's what defund means. It says take money in a place that is violent, is not working, is proven to kill Black people, move it into a place that names that we want Black people to live and to thrive.
Reallocate those funds into things that matter to the community.
Exactly. Yeah. If you had something in your personal budget that that harmed you, that harmed your life, then you would find a better way. But for some reason, folks are scared that by saying that this isn't working, that it somehow would create more harm, when actually I think the harm we can see is so clear.
Yeah. This is a question, forgive me if this sounds like Pollyanna or something, but is there a world where you think you'll get real allies in the police department to agree with the defunding and also sort of help implement what that would, like, is there any like we're gonna we agree and cooperate? I know that sounds like a fucking Pollyanna question.
It's not, girl. These are the conversations. I don't believe so. I think that the police more often than not know why they're joining. I believe that the police historically are rooted in histories of control and domination in communities. I know that it's provocative to say, but I don't give a fuck that people who oftentimes choose specific careers are choosing so because they want to live out a specific version of what that thing does, which is to have a gun, is to run through traffic lights, is to, and I think it's one of the reasons why I get so pissed when people say Blue Lives Matter. Well, it's not a life, it's a job. A Black life is a life. My life is a life that I'm saying you could take from me. A blue life is a job. You're saying that you would rather defend a specific type of job than to defend a human being. And so I oftentimes, like, when I get into conversations about like the good cops, the bad cops, the apples, the whatever analogy people want to add to it, is I'm like, if you had a structure that was truly ineffective in what it says it's going to do, then why would you be so protective over that structure than of the what you say that you want to do. And I just have to be real with you about it. It's because it's doing what we want it to do. People want to kill Black people. I don't know if, like, I don't think that's provocative to say anymore. People want to, I think that there is a feeling that we cannot build a different type of community, that actually Black people are inherently scary. I think that people do get scared, and that's why they cross the street. I think that that's true. And I think if we don't actually name that implicit bias that many of us are taught and fed, then I think that we can't actually get to what we're trying to say, which there are people in this world and in this country in particular who want to build community safety protocols, who want to ensure that people's houses aren't broken into, that want to ensure that people can walk down the street and feel safe. I believe that. I really do. But I also know that the way that it's currently moving is that it's not safety if everyone doesn't benefit from it.
Yeah.
It's just control.
Yeah. Safety for whom?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I went grocery shopping yesterday, and I just had this, there's a group of men, there was a group 2 days ago in my neighborhood who were walking around with bats. And
like baseball
my neighbors,
like baseball bats, like
baseball bats, girl.
Okay.
Yeah. And folks were saying, at least my neighbors were saying, that they were connected to the police department. I don't want to spread a rumor. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but what I will say is I knew that they weren't being pulled off the street. No one was saying that they were creating harm, that they were scaring folks. But I was walking to the car to go to the grocery store, then back from the grocery store to my house, and I was scared. You felt menaced. Yeah, and who do you call when you can't call the cops? And that's what I think, what I'm saying is that I live here too. We live here too. And if I can't call the cops, then actually it's not doing what we're saying it's doing. So what's the problem? Like, and that's where I think that so many of these conversations are so important, which is, what are people protecting right now? What is the obsession with protecting this particular institution? Go ahead.
My sort of like bird's eye view thoughts would be, power likes to protect power in general. Power likes to hold on to power. And unfortunately, a lot of people's idea of power means control over other people.
I agree.
Which I think is in a sort of bigger, like, woo-woo sense, is like not the essence of real power.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I also, I hope that people are situating it in this historical and political moment as well. It actually is different from an uprising that happened during the Obama administration. Obama was not by any means a perfect responder to uprising or rebellion. No. But I will say, I think we all know that it's different, and we all feel that difference under Trump. If we take a step back in our students of history, we know that white violence, in particular white nationalist violence, like in the KKK and now other groups, I think the 3 Percenters and others, that
bunch of fucking nerds.
I know.
like, not to be, but just in sort of like just fucking nerds.
Yes, just like in the dark web,
like play out your superhero fantasy someplace, like do cosplay. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. Anyway.
Totally. So, those are not isolated events that just happen in the dark web or happen in corners of our communities. Every moment in the United States where there has been racial progress, there has been a backlash of white violence. It's actually not my opinion. It's like you can go back, right, and look at this. So one thing is, with after the Emancipation Proclamation that said that not only were enslaved Black people free, but it also asked this big question, the Emancipation Proclamation. It said, what responsibility do states have for inviting Black citizens into their economy, into their communities, into public policy? And the emancipation during that time became a period called that we now know as Reconstruction. And Reconstruction was essentially a very short-lived period, about 13 years, that was intended to answer this question: reconstruct. What is our responsibility to Black people? And it failed largely because the KKK was so violent that lynching grabbed a hold of the South so violently that truly Reconstruction is one of the unanswered questions of the United States democracy. What responsibility do states have? What responsibility does the federal government have? And what responsibility do local governments have to Black people who are part of a thriving economy, a thriving community? And we're in one of those moments. And so I feel like, for me, it feels exciting, empowering that we can see so clearly. I feel like all the lights are on in our country. We know what part of the history book we're in. We're in the part where we elected the first Black president. We had some localized police reform. We've had some electoral progress. We've had some public policy progress, and some, other types of tech and social progress. And so what happens? A huge backlash where a small minority of white men who want to protect their power say, not on my watch, and are terrorizing our communities, are infiltrating peaceful protests.
Well, this is one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about.
Yes, tell me.
Okay,
I was getting long-winded, girl, so.
No, not at all. You were perfect. But some of the instigators of violence among peaceful protesters, can you speak to that? Because it seems from an outsider like, okay, there's some people maybe just fucking taking advantage of a situation, being assholes, right? And then it also seems like, oh, there's a coordinated effort in order to disrupt that which would have been a peaceful protest. Can you speak to that?
Yeah.
Did I get it wrong?
Yes.
Tell me if I'm totally wrong. Okay.
No, that is right. And I saw someone in the chat say all the lights are on except at the White House. I love that. That's good. Lights off for Donald Trump, for
it's
sure.
True.
So lights off. Yeah. So it was deeply coordinated, Annie. So much so that in 24 hours, nearly every major rebellion that was happening this past weekend were infiltrated by white nationalists. Known white nationalists, folks who you could see their white nationalist tattoos, who were showing up. I mean, there's so much video footage of folks who had a very particular type of uniform, a type of armband, who were literally had hammers, were placing bricks.
I saw that.
Right. And what I will say about this to you, that I just like conversationally, is I remember the reopen protest where, the white guys were showing up at state capitals like, I want to be able
freedom fighters.
Yes. I want to be able to go to Denny's, damn it.
Don't tread on me.
Yes. Do not tread on me. I should be able to go get a haircut.
We got this wrong. You might be. Okay. Yeah.
And I remember, having been so deeply politicized through the 21st century protest movement, is they were walking up to state capitals like in Michigan and Ohio with rifles,
with AR-15s and shit.
And
they're like, they're like Sandy
Hook.
They're like, Sandy Hook was a hoax, but I'm holding this AR-15 just for my own edification.
Exactly. And so how would, I actually invite people to think of these two things side by side. So just weeks before, probably days, it was still going on, but the media was a little less interested in it because it was so foolish, because so many people were dying. We had reached 100,000 people. So these reopened protests started to fall from the storyline. But there were these reopened protests and all of the pictures that accompanied them, all the visuals. And then there was, then just a few weeks later, a person publicly murdered as a person held their knee on their neck for 8 minutes. And immediately as people move into the street, they are tear gassed, violently assaulted, more murders of protesters. And so if you right now are questioning this concept that there is both unfairness, that the police are out of control, that there is a difference in the way that some people are protesting and others, then you are, I think, consciously deciding to turn away from the truth, which is that some people are deemed, their voices are worthy of being upset, of demanding for more, and others aren't. And uprisings of this nature will never stop until people acknowledge that and right size the systems that make that possible.
The one of the things that struck me, I couldn't watch the video of George Floyd's murder, but that was sadism.
Uh-oh. Am I still there? Okay.
Okay, sorry. Somebody called me. My back end off called me. But that,
you're a very
that
important
was
person.
Sadism. That it was sadistic. There was no world in which even the sort of, right wing side is even defending it. It was so sadistic in broad daylight that even, because I'll look at Fox News and stuff like that for fun, and even they're not defending it, or I mean they're swooping in and kind of concocting a narrative that speaks to their politics and their viewership, but like,
yeah.
And I feel like that even was different than like Avon, where they're like, well, he had a bag from 7-Eleven or all this bullshit, whatever.
Yes, right. No, that's true. And I remember when Meghan McCain was so outraged and was like, we saw this, we saw him killed. Yeah. And I remember thinking, what world am I in? But what was so clear to me also is that outrage still was only acceptable when it was managed in a way that kept people as comfortable as possible. So it was outrageous that there was a video. It was outrageous that he kept his knee on his neck even when he said that he was dying. It was outrageous that we could all see it. But it wasn't worthwhile for all three of the police officers to be indicted. It wasn't worthwhile for people to be in the streets publicly mourning, blocking off traffic, making people uncomfortable. And so we immediately went from the expression of grief, which is super worthy, and I'm happy that people acknowledge the truth of the moment, because they so often don't, to a autopsy report that said, a public one that said that he already had pre-existing conditions. I'm like, when did y'all start caring about pre-existing conditions? Like, we're so underserved in this country.
Oh my God.
But that then, as there was a swell of rebellion, that people immediately reverted back to, but see, now y'all ruined it because you're making too much noise. Now you ruined it because you don't have the right to name. And I guess I want everyone in conversation, with us, listening, in conversation with their families, with their journals as they figure this out, is to like really look at yourself and say, do you believe that if an 8-minute video cannot convince us, a public video that was shared millions of times, just trauma porn, if you really believe that isn't enough to change a structure, what do you expect that we should do when we know that that change won't be met any other way? And one thing that someone said to me that rocked me was, I have never seen a white person murdered on TV. And I thought, I don't think I have either.
Yeah.
But I've seen many, 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 many Black people literally murdered. I could find any level of trauma porn. And that should rock people at their core.
I mean, absolutely. And going back to just the images that we have in our cultural consciousness, going back to lynching and Black men hanging from the poplar tree and women having a picnic. You know, it's like, it's those images are disproportionately in our psyches, in our national memory and present.
That's right.
And what, as far, I know you have to go really soon, but I wanted to have, I had like one question about voting.
Yeah.
So you're an expert in all of that. So can you just talk about it? And then I want to end with one funny story that happened to me at the protest in LA.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, a few things. I oftentimes when this level of civil disobedience happens, folks immediately try to move people into lanes. Why don't you care about this at any other time? You better have voted in 2016. You better be voting in 2020. And I just want everyone to know that to get the level of change that's required, we actually need every single tactic moving on all cylinders. We need good public policy. We need good elected leaders. We need local governance and public policy that works. Like, we literally need all of it. And so the one part of that that's coming up, y'all, we can do this, is that we get back in the ring with Trump. And the movement for Black Lives, it very much is clear that one of the reasons that there was a excessive and public affirmation of white nationalism was because Black people were winning in 2014, 2015, and shifting the conversation around racial justice. And so Trump, in many ways, is bucking at Black movement and bucking at the progress that we were making. And so we're going to get back in the ring with him.
Wait, Jess, I thought Black love Trump. Hold on a second.
He's sick. He's so sick.
Yeah.
And so, so a couple of things that folks can do now. One is, obviously, you should make sure that you're registered. What's changing really quickly right now is the voting rights laws based on our quarantine. And so many states have been able to positively pass vote by mail. Some are stuck in the courts. Others are being challenged by the federal government and the Department of Justice. It's definitely changing, and it's going to continue to change, hopefully in the right direction through the summer. There are a couple of organizations that you should be following in order to protect your vote and to ensure you know what to do. One is Fair Fight Action, which is an organization that was created by Stacey Abrams. It is challenging legislation all over the country, and it's also protecting folks' votes. So please go to Fair Fight Action. Additionally,
I'll put up these links too, like on later. So don't worry. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, Geneva. Hi, my love.
Oh, hi, Geneva.
I see her in there.
Uh-oh.
Is another really excellent voting rights organization. I also want to name that over the next couple of months, there's going to be a website called Black November. This is specifically for Black voters. So, you know, it is a place where we can go. It's going to be a one-stop shop for voting rights, voter guides, thinking about taking the demands that we have now and meeting them at the local level. So I would love for all of you to stay in touch there. And of course, m4bl.org is where you can engage with the demands of the movement right now, as well as a long-term vision for Black lives.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I know we have to go, but can I ask you what you believe that the music industry's responsibility is right now in this moment? I just am interested in your brain.
Well, I would say that the music industry, like all areas of capitalist commerce, has also been a massive perpetrator of taking advantage of Black people through the years. You can look at that in any number of ways. And so they did, after a sort of hectic Black Square Day on Tuesday, they did kind of pony up and give a fair amount of money to the cause. So that was good. I was glad they kind of like put their money where their Black Square was. But as far, I think it's like twofold, right? So I as an artist with some a platform want to give a voice to you, for example, people who are experts in the field, who know what the fuck they're talking about, and just share some wisdom, share some nuance, everything for everybody. So there's that, but then also I kind of think like I've spent a lot of time being an artist, so I think a lot of things just kind of get synthesized into work that will, I know that doesn't sound very that sounds not very urgent, and maybe it sounds like a cop out, but I think I'll just make a lot of work that hopefully do all of this, and then just continuing to give, continuing to kind of try to be on the right side of history as we go forward. Yeah.
I honestly think that if I could just, before you tell your story, is just to impart that I think that oftentimes unlearning can feel really lonely, and you feel like I have done unlearning myself of how to lead campaigns. I've done a lot of unlearning around gender and the gender binary, and around queerness and etc. And we unlearn. That is our job. That's our work.
Yeah.
Especially in this country where our education system really does work to guide us in really the media and so much of cultural bias. And I just invite folks in to the version of it that doesn't feel isolating, that is actually exciting, and where you grow and you feel that growth, and where you are willing to be transformed in the moment, so that you can get to a place where it feels a lot less lonely and you're a lot more clear. And so one is folks should just be reading. Like, we actually do have to read more than headlines and more than each other's thoughts. We have to engage deeply. And then second, engage where you are. Everyone should be looking for a local organization to do the politicization work that's needed. And then third, I would say, is to hold yourself accountable, to show up differently. That it's actually not enough to believe things and to retweet them the right way, but we actually have to be uncomfortable in the giving up of privilege if we have it, and also the naming of what's needed, even if it's really scary. So anyways, I see you doing that. I actually think that the fact that there are folks right now who are like, I'm just going to sit back and allow folks to stand in the gap of the public conversation that hasn't happened, I just think that's dope. And I think all of us have a lot more of that that's required.
Yeah, it's important to interrogate the cracks in your own empathy.
Yes.
In which a lot of that has been that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But it's very worth it. And
totally, it's very hard to do. Yeah.
One really quick funny story about the protest.
Yes.
One very quick aside. My friend I went with my friend Archie, and he turned to me at one point and he goes, "The worst thing that could have happened to me at a protest just happened." I'm like, what? My shit's untied. There's no place.
Did he trip and fall? No, that's real.
Yeah, no, really. But then the other thing that happened,
you got to be ready at a moment's notice. Yes.
I know. There's no way to, but the other thing that happened was we were there, and obviously it's COVID, so everybody's in masks for the most part. And a white girl came up beside us, and as people were chanting, and the chanting had died down, she screamed, "All lives matter!" But she was right next to me, so it looked like I was saying that, and you obviously can't tell because there are masks on. And I was like, "What? Yes, but no!" And then it was just like,
you're like, that wasn't me.
Yeah, that wasn't me. And then also, then she got into like a moving vehicle.
Oh shit! Yeah,
I
no,
was
that's
like,
provocateur. Yeah,
that's
a
provocateur. I was
Yeah.
like, that, like,
And they're everywhere. They've infiltrated every campaign I've ever been on, every protest I've ever been in, and so that is a real thing. That's scary. I'm glad that that didn't provoke anything, because that's the point. Is to provoke, to sow dissension. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we should do this again. This wasn't
Yeah,
enough time.
Anytime.
I have a nightly planning call every night. So
of course, you are so busy.
yeah.
And thank you for doing this. And
Of course,
I adore you, and so glad to see you.
Thank you. I adore you too. And we're gonna win.
Yeah.
It feels really uncomfortable right now, but we're gonna win. So I'm glad that we're all on the right side of history.
Yeah.
Love you, Annie.
Love you, babe.
I'll talk to you really soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
again.
Oh my gosh. We should do it again. We really should.
So anytime. Yes, absolutely.
Let's do it again. Yeah. Okay.
Good luck on the call.
Thank you.
Bye.